Lex, thank you very much indeed. Thank you to the academies, Professor von Braun and Professor Malman, for inviting me, and friends and colleagues. Great opportunity to, always died to say this, pontificate in the pontificate. I'm going to talk a little bit about systemic anti-cancer therapies and some of the challenges for our health systems, but I'm going to start with some principles, really. I think one of the problems really looking at this from a policy perspective is you've really got to see things as they are. There's often too much hype and hyperbole around the benefits of technology. So I think there needs to be some more ruthless honesty. And secondly, this issue about what we're trying to achieve. A lot of cancer can feel very utilitarian, when what we're really trying to improve is the social justice for all our patients. So with that in mind, let me just articulate the challenge. First of all, wow, exponential innovation. The numbers of new systemic therapies gaining EMA and FDA authorization is extraordinary, probably the single biggest technological area in human history. But looking to the future, look at this, something we did for the Financial Times, a heat map by individual therapeutic areas and by the major Western countries only. And that massive dark line there is oncology. Basically, over 80% of the pipeline is oncology. In roulette terms, everybody's putting money on black. So this is either fabulous news or it's frightening, depending on which side of the aisle you're looking at from. Are we seeing exponential increases in value? Well, on one hand, actually, health technology agencies have really taken off over the last 20 years. Around the world, we're seeing real improvement in HTA. We're seeing adaptive HTA technology approaches being used in Rwanda. The National Cancer Grid now have HTA. And we're developing much more interesting and novel ways of dealing with uncertainty, like MCDA. On the other hand, we have the bag problem. So the bag problem is as follows. These are both bags. They do exactly the same thing. You put things in them, you carry around with them. If you wrap the plastic bag on the bottom panel in lovely wrapping and give it to somebody for Christmas, you generally don't get much approval. The bag above it, though, you do, because its value is considered to be so much greater in society. And this is the subjectivity of when we look at value. So it's a real problem when we're coming to try and make logical discussions and agreements about what is really delivering value. And also the problem is that not all technologies deliver clinically meaningful improvements and outcomes that matter to patients. This technology is very popular in France. It's been used for the last 10 years. And if I can go forward. The French are kind of, there we are. It's an instant British accent breath spray. It makes you sound richer, sound smarter, and even look more attractive. And all my French friends have been trying this for years, but they still sound French, unfortunately. So this is slightly tongue-in-cheek, giving you some idea of what we mean by clinically meaningful benefit. This amazing piece of work that Nathan Cherney did, appraising FDA approvals of immuno-oncology. These were drug pair indications between 2017 and 2021 in both the adjuvant and the non-curative setting. So basically what we have here is a whole load of drug pair indications which really deliver better outcomes. We have some in the middle, probably coverage, but with limited distribution for the market. In other words, not quite sure what's going on. But look at the numbers then that are still in this 1 to 2 category. The reality is when you look at the data from those pivotal trials, they probably shouldn't have been on the market in the first place, but they are. They're approved by the EMA, they're on most of our markets there. So with that, we have a real kind of, I think, an issue from the clinically meaningful benefit element. Many of you aware, particularly from Ian Tannock's group, there's been a lot of argument and discussion about the endpoints that we're currently using in clinical trials, particularly between overall survival and progression-free survival. It is a very complicated, nuanced argument that depends on setting, that depends on site-specific cancer. But the reality is we are seeing increasing divergence between the evidence for marketing authorizations and what we need from a practical, i.e. clinical management, and from a policy perspective. But I want to make the point that this problem goes way beyond medicines. In radiotherapy, in surgery, Yolande Levens and Esther are working on this at the moment for radiotherapy. But there's a general issue, really, with technologies getting into market with greater and greater uncertainty about what their real clinical benefit is and what their overall long-term impact. This paper caused a real meltdown in the UK. Nasir Hussain wrote it from the London School of Economics and did a superb piece of analysis. essentially asking the question, new drugs recommended by NICE, have they really delivered value to the English NHS as a whole? And if you look at oncology, we've spent about 20 billion on cancer drugs over the last 20 years. But frankly, the QALYs foregone have outstripped those gained. And that for 3 reasons. Number one is we have a willingness to pay threshold in the HTA that's too high for our GDP. Number 2, we are allowing drugs into the market with very low clinically meaningful benefit. And the third thing is, and this is a culture problem that Dr. Hood alluded to, is our medical oncologists now are starting to really heavily overuse systemic therapies in the last 3-6 months of life. And we have a real problem there. And it's not just systemic therapies, it's interventional radiology, it is treat, treat, treat. But I don't think we have this tendency to keep pointing our finger at industry, and I've said this again and again, find me a CEO who doesn't want to make profit for his company, and I'll point to a CEO who's about to lose their job. This is just pointing all the time at industry and saying we want lower prices is not the overall solution. The reality is systemic therapies and other technological innovation is this problem of the bone mold disease. In most industries, technologies improve productivity. They don't do that in healthcare. The robot is the classic example. By the way, that game is called Operation. If you ever want to play Operation and win, use a surgical robot, because it's fantastic. It'll guarantee you win. The robots, for example, the Da Vinci robots take about 3 times as long to set up and put down as the open procedures. And what we see, and again, is healthcare costs are going up because of human resource costs, but none of our technologies are improving productivity. In some cases, productivity is actually going down in the West. So, solutions, because I think probably we're more keen on how do we sort this out. First of all, technological innovation is an unstoppable force in oncology across the board, whether it's drugs, AI, surgery, radiotherapy. So when you read articles saying we must slow things down, we must remove Me Too's, etc., that's just fantasy land, okay? Changing the regulatory environment. Sorry, I can't believe. I did a commentary for the conversation, which I got quite a lot of trouble with, but never mind. The European Medicines Agency is part of Project Orbis. There is discussion about whether or not we should raise thresholds for marketing authorizations. Personally, I think that's probably almost politically impossible now. In fact, the direction seems to be downward. We'd also have to radically change our clinical trials ecosystem. That's going to be very hard work. We could, of course, offset this with enhanced HTA methods. Again, tricky thing to do, frankly, in many countries. What about new actors disrupting the market? Ingemar talked about China earlier. I can't mention what the group's called, but I chair a global health and cancer oversight group. China is a superpower in oncology. The technological advances they're making are extraordinary. And there's no doubt that when you look at the future of many of the Western immuno-oncology drugs, their marketing authorizations, even with Evergreen, are going to run out in 2030 to 2035. China is piling into this market, as well as advanced biologicals. And also, in places like India, we're actually seeing some remarkable homegrown innovation in CAR-T. Basically, someone like Manju Sengar from Tata Memorial Center, she explains to me the cost of delivering stem cell transplantation and all the modern hemato-oncology drugs is prohibitive for India. But if you can put in homegrown CAR-T and really cure people, that is a complete game changer. So there's extraordinary innovation going on around the world outside. Other solutions, there's lots of work being done on new economic and fiscal models. It's great, a lot of it's quite theoretical, but it's going to be dependent on the fact that we do more socioeconomic research that's actually directly linked to the policy environments we all work in. And secondly, we've heard a lot about politics today. We need a much wider political economy of cancer research agenda to actually influence the political mood music. Shaping services and systems, innovation by itself is not enough. This is a really big issue, I think. We constantly talk about technologies, but it's the services and the systems that deliver the benefits of those technologies. And just to give you an idea, in the English NHS of what problems we have in systemic therapies, this is the English audits, the NHS audits. As Alex said earlier, we've got lots of problems. This is one of the few areas we haven't got problems in, which is the national audit. But have a look at this. This is delivery of Folfox mostly and Folfiri. This is to patients, metastatic setting here. These are individual hospitals delivering systemic therapy in the metastatic setting. 106 hospitals. 11 hospitals are 2 standard deviations above the mean, and 11 are 2 standard deviations below. That's a 20 to 70% variation in hospital admissions. The cost of this is astronomical, astronomical. So when we're talking about systemic therapies, it's not enough just to research and develop new therapies. You have to develop the systems to be able to deliver them. And right now, this is very bad news. What about challenging the cancer R&D ecosystem? I mean, we talk about a research agenda that delivers on social justice, and we've been talking about Europe today a lot. I mean, we've had 20 years of the European research area. Peter's going to say more about this tomorrow. And look where Central and Eastern Europe is compared to where we are in high income. This is not a pro-equity approach, okay? We have problems. And I think it was Einstein who said, if you do the same policy thing again and again, it's the kind of definition of insanity. Less is more agenda. If you look at what we're doing in systemic therapy and cancer generally, the path to treatment's getting longer and longer. The pathways are getting more complicated. Our patients are more complex. We have to have a research agenda that compresses treatment, that compresses pathways, if we're going to have any hope of developing any sort of fiscal headroom or headroom in capacity and capability to take on the next innovations in the future. I think we wrote this about 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago with C.S. Pramish from Tata and Chris Booth from Kingston. And it's got worse. So the gap is widening. On every bit of evidence we've got, the gap is widening between technological innovation and our ability to deliver them in an affordable and equitable manner. And what that means is we're completely failing in this second translational gap. Operational science, cancer systems research, implementation science, economics and social science. These are big areas, and our research funders are not actually stepping up to the plate on this. They're doing little bits here and there, but overall, this is a massive, massive deficit. And this is my last slide, X. I mean, I guess the big bag there is the bag of goodies, the new systemic therapies, the AI, the fantastic new radiotherapy, the great new surgical robots. But there's that kind of hole in the middle there that we're missing. We're missing that last piece of how we actually deliver this for our patients and for society as a whole that's going to make things sustainable. And I think systemic therapies are the bellwether for most technical innovation looking over the last 10 years. Thank you very much indeed.